Hey there, YouTube. I'm Ikitsu. This is the Ikitsu Times. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to a little bit of Sins of the Solar Empire 2. So today we're going to be playing, or we're going to be looking at the Sulsurak Defensor, and this one I really sort of wonder about the naming convention of, because a lot of the Vasari ships you've got blah 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 and then English word, like the Tosarak Raider or the Revestra Skirmisher. And my assumption, generally speaking, is that the first word is like the Vasari word for the second word. But then you get this bullshit where Defensor isn't a real word, really. So, I don't know that Sulsurak actually means Defensor or Defender. It seems like they've actually got like something and then another thing. So I don't actually know. This is the ship that really just wrecks my perception of how the Vasari language works. Anyway, let's get that preamble out of the way and start talking about the actual ship itself. So this is the second best point defense corvette that the Vasari have, which is weird because it's weird that they've got point defense corvette in the first place. The ship itself I kind of dislike because it is a counter to things that are supposed to counter to it in a way that I think is toxic to the game. And just generally speaking, I don't like this ship. But let's go through it here. 0 durability, 410 shield points, 180 armor points, 460 hull points. Fairly fragile ship, but not that bad. It's got 3.1 damage per second, actually 3 as its base value. You can't get it with that value because you have to get the first tech upgrade. On 2 light pulse guns, total of 6 damage per second at 90 pierce. And it's got 2 PD pulse guns at 2 damage per second each for 4 damage per second total. So, the Sulsurak Defensor, it's a corvette. It swarms around enemy ships and then it can potentially also shoot down missiles and strike craft. It's actually the thing that you were supposed to use for that purpose until they added the Warden. And I think that the Warden actually acts as a much more reliable and dependable and sensible point defense ship. But the Sulsurak Defensor, of course, is still pretty good at its role. Now, I think that this thing's actually kind of a toxic addition to the game in some ways, but I don't think they're going to remove it. In any event, hidden statistics 18 armor strength is pretty low, and maximum speed of 960. So, pretty good overall damage per second on this thing. It's got a total of 10 damage per second against like other corvettes or stuff like that. It suffers a little bit from only having 90 pierce against other frigates, but it's still doing enough damage in those cases that it's not really struggling like that much or anything like that. It's a little bit behind like a Shriken, but well, it's quite a bit behind a Shriken, but it's not like it's getting down to Acolyte levels of poor here. Anyhow, as far as like upgrades go, we are looking at pulse weapons here, so we are going to be getting those for both of the weapon types there. So just all of these. You're probably not going to get the most benefit from the top tier ones because you'll probably switch off these guys. It used to be that you would still potentially need to get these in the late game because they were your biggest, most powerful point defense weapon. However, since you had access to other things that gave you point defense, you could rely on, for example, a whole bunch of Ortova suppressors. Cortovises have got a point defense gun on them, even if it's not like as good a one. The Last Arc Transporter also has point defense on top of it. There's probably something else that I'm forgetting, but this is prior to the Warden, so not including that. But they've got just sort of like random point defense slapped on a whole bunch of stuff there. Anyway, so this thing, it's not that durable. It's not really like particularly fast, and it's not that hard hitting, but it's hard hitting enough that it can, it's a little bit behind something like a Shriken in terms of the damage output. It's like okay for its durability for a Corvette, although it's not good enough for what you would want it to be. Now, the reason I think that Sulsurak Defensor is kind of like a toxic addition to the game is that early game you're sort of looking at the Tempest as the counter to this thing for Advent. The other thing that you could use to fight Corvettes is Fightercraft. And this thing is a counter to Fightercraft and to missiles. So it kind of counters the two things that are supposed to counter it, leaving you with. But it's same for Tech. Like, Tech is supposed to be able to use something like, say, their Percheron carriers to destroy these things, and this thing counters those. And it's also supposed to be able. They're also supposed to be able to use like the Shriken to take out Corvettes, but this thing actually does full damage against the Shriken. So it also does like 50-50 against those. And since like Tech has to tech into frigate shields, this thing actually just beats them up before you get access to that. So you're in a situation where this thing's like kind of killing all of its counters. in spite of that, it's not necessarily like amazing or anything like that. It's in this sort of weird position of being like not very good, but also very toxic. I don't like them very much. There are ways to kill it as well with your capital ships, like radiation bombs or what have you. Especially like a Malice and a Nova, Pulse Nova or Plasma Nova, whatever, for like a Radiance on Advent. And like if you are losing the war with like Sulsuraks and you're fighting up against like Tempest, then Tempest like eventually will reach a point where they'll start wiping out the Sulsuraks like really really hard. Same thing with carriers and fighters, although in that case it's a little bit more in the Sulsurak's favor there, but. Yeah, it's kind of rough actually countering these things. They can be very annoying. It's like just good that they can't really easily damage a bunch of your ship types, including even your frigates. So I don't like these things. They're very annoying. I don't like having to deal with them. In spite of that, I also don't think they're very good. Weird ship as far as that goes. For cost, what we're looking at for the Sulsurak Defensor is 4 supply cost. Costs 60 metal and 35 crystal. It's not that expensive, but there is actually a cheaper option for Vasari to get an early game point defense corvette that you can get a whole bunch of. And that is this guy here. So this is the Jakara Navigator, which is the scout that you start the game with unlocked. Now, unlike literally every other scout in the game, the Jakara Navigator actually comes with 2 point defense guns at 2 damage per second each, 0 pierce, for a total of 4 damage per second from its point defense pulse guns. It has 60 durability, which is better than 0. It's got 480 shield points, which is more. It's got 315 armor points, which is more. It's got 550 hull points, which is more. And if we look here, it's got 18 armor strength, which is the same, and it's got a max speed of 1,410, which is practically 50% faster. So, obviously, like, this is going to cost a pretty kind of, like, similar amount. It's got pretty similar stats there. So let's take a look here. Jakara Navigator, it costs 3 supply, which is less, and it costs 40 metal. So actually, the Jakara Navigator is like a substantially more efficient point defense pulse gun platform than the Sulsurak Defensor, which is weird. I don't see them getting used this way, but I think that's an underutilized and underrated tech. One of the reasons is that you do have to like disable the scout autocast ability that is otherwise like by default turned on for these little jerks. So you like plop a bunch of them out. They've got their scout turned on and they just sort of like wander off in the wrong direction. Yeah, these things, I don't necessarily know that I would actually want to use Jakara Navigators as my point defense platforms if I was playing as Vasari, because it's a micro nightmare, but I think that they are a really cost efficient way of getting a whole bunch of point defense guns out there if you really need them. They're actually surprisingly durable. They're incredibly reactive because they're able to get around the field so quickly. Their durability is actually on point for what you're paying, especially. I just don't get why they're like this and why this stupid jerk is like this. Now, this does have the benefit of it is capable of punching Striken in the face, whereas this guy is not. But if you're really just after the point defense aspect, the Jakara Navigator is actually a superior ship in like every way to the Sulsurak Defensor. This is only viable if you want to also fight things. Now, this thing's also been made slightly irrelevant with, as I sort of mentioned, the addition of the Warden. So this is the Sulsurak Warden. This thing is a lot closer to just a standard conventional point defense gun platform. So the Sulsurak Defensor kind of like buzzes around, and if you're in certain circumstances, a lot of these can just get killed off without anything really focus firing them. They just sort of like zip around and they kind of like take a hit from something weird and they die. The Sulsurak Wardens, you kind of have to actually focus down a little bit, but they are much easier to focus down and kill that way. So I'm not 100% sure which is more reliable, but I do think that you're sort of going to move away from these guys in the later game, especially because the point defense damage from these guys is actually quite poor compared to the Warden. So in any event, though, again, for weapons, you're only looking at the pulse charge weapons. For defenses, again, things like reinforced nanite conduits and the hull point bonuses, these are quite good for this thing. It's not usually going to get the majority of enemy focus fire put on it, so they're probably going to survive taking a few hits. And when they do, they can regenerate up really, really quickly. the more hit points, the more armor, the more like whatever you've got, the more likely they are going to survive. So that you can actually do that. You've also got access to things like the armor point upgrades, and again, I think that the turn speed and acceleration are better since it lets you reposition them out of a bad situation a little bit more easily than they otherwise would. So I think they're quite good for that. The regenerative shielding, again, I think that the actual shield values, and for the other variant of these guys, the shield burst, they're not as useful as just like generally regenerating the shields all the time for this class of ship, which I think is a very powerful ability for it. You do get very large multipliers as Vasari, generally speaking, but this isn't a ship that I think gets the best use out of those, just like most Corvettes, just because your base values are much lower. Still, though, I think it does help them sort of keep a role in the late game where they're able to survive at least a little bit so that they don't immediately get gibbed, and that their damage is capable of like keeping relative pace with later game units. It's just that with their low pierce, they're not really going to be able to slap out other things, and with the increased amount of like firepower just on the field, the odds of them getting focused down incidentally or accidentally is much higher. So I do think that they do suffer a little bit from that. As far as like other techs go in Empire Research, the other variety, the Alliance Vasari, are capable of getting like a build speed bonus, which I think is actually really good for the Sulsurak Defensor. Like I mentioned, if you're fighting like against carriers or against tempests, the Sulsurak Defensor, if it comes down to like mass, if you've got more defensors than there are tempests on the field by enough, you can sort of make it so that you're not getting hit by any of those missiles. But at a certain threshold, you're going to find that you're losing Sulsurak Defensors pretty quickly against Tempests, and as you lose them, that accelerates. That keeps getting faster and faster and faster as you shoot down less missiles, and they kill more of your defensors more quickly. And the way that you sort of solve this is you only go into those fights if you've got enough of your Sulsurak Defensors. I think, reliably speaking, to survive that, you kind of need like 2 Sulsurak Defensors for every Tempest, which isn't necessarily that cost effective. I think at that point you definitely want to switch to Wardens, but it is still much better than any other Corvette is doing into Tempests, which are a very strong hard counter into Corvettes currently. They're extremely good right now into Corvettes. I also think you can 1-for-1 Sulsurak Defensors into Shuriken, which normally I would say are also a good counter into Corvettes. So yeah, that's kind of everything there. As far as phase resonance goes, this is one of those ships where it kind of like benefits from mostly just like the little bit of weapon reload here. You're probably going to switch again these things to something else in the later game, even though like later on you used to have to still rely on these in some circumstances for some types of point defense work, especially if your opponent was really spamming missiles. Now you can avoid getting these guys if you want to. But if you are into the late game, like 15% weapon reload on point defense style weapons is an extremely powerful ability. Making it so that you shoot faster is better for point defense style weapons than doing more damage. This also does give them a little bit extra damage, meaning they can one-shot missiles more frequently or two-shot tougher missiles. So that also helps a little bit, but the weapon reload is really where it's at for this sort of thing there. Mobility isn't going to matter for these guys that much. They're generally faster than most of your other ships, and you want to keep your fleet together when you're talking about the Sulsurak Defensor, because like the point of this guy is that you're supposed to have it defending your other ships. Now you could just build a crapload of these guys, mix them with raiders, and make people who are trying to defend against your raiders like really mad if they were building Tempests. Especially because you defend against Tempests with like only usually like a handful, or you defend against raiders with only like a handful of Tempests. So you go like a 50-50 split and you can suddenly just raid for free, but that also works against carriers too, so that I think would be very funny. I have not tried that, but I've not even seen that, so there may be a practical reason not to do that, but basically I'd say that the mobility tree is a little bit worse for this type of ship than the combat one, and obviously you gain nothing from utility. So yeah, Sulsurak Defensor. It's in a weird spot. I hate this ship with a passion. Not really, actually. I don't care that much, but I do find it very annoying to play against. But I also find it to be a really weak option. It's a very strange. It's a very funny ship. It's like the blue card of ships. There, it negates a lot of stuff that's not supposed to, and no one likes playing against it, or I don't like playing against it. But yeah, do try out in a multiplayer match massing Jakara Navigators as point defense if you want to give that a go and then show me that video, because I would be very happy to see that happen. I think that would be very, very funny. But in any event, that is going to be our video for today. I hope you found this one enjoyable. And of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.